بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. We begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the compassionate, the merciful. We ask that He send peace and blessings upon our noble and our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill your heart and mind with the light of His words and His wisdom, alayhi afdal as-salah wa salam, and teaches of our religion that which benefits us and pushes away from us any knowledge that doesn't benefit us. So Shaykh Abdul Kareem Hamda asked us to switch his session with this one for now, and then he'll do Shafi'i fiqh inshallah next hour for those of you who are online. And before we get started, because we will probably be doing a midterm, maybe next week or the week after that, we'll do a take home. So let's do a little bit of review, not a lot. Let's at least do from last session. Who can tell me what are the three madhabs that Shaykh Abdullah Siraj ad-Din mentions in terms of how we deal with weak hadith? What are the three madhabs of how to deal with a weak hadith? Can we act on it? We can't act on it. What are the three madhabs? Yeah, go ahead.
So one was that you can't use it at all.
Yes.
Another is that, which is like the most common one, is that you can use it for virtues, and there was 4 conditions.
Okay, we'll talk about those in a second.
And the third one, I believe, is that you can use it for everything. Like
Yeah, you can always use it, right? And that first one, again, I need to do a little bit of research. I trust Shaykh Abdullah Siraj. He's an amazing scholar and a hadith scholar. I've heard some of our current ulama say that there was nobody in history who believed that, and that it was a misreading of their opinion. But, I think if it's in the books of people like Shaykh Abdullah, we have to give that weight, that he's saying that. I mean, he's a Sunni scholar by every stretch of the imagination, by every definition that we have. And he is an amazing scholar, yani. Allah yarhamu. So we have to kind of give that weight. And he's saying that this was a group of people, particularly of Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi. And people confuse Ibn Arabi with Ibn al-Arabi. This is not Ibn Arabi, the famous Sufi, right? This is Ibn al-Arabi, the hadith scholar and the faqih, right? And he says, and Ibn Sayyid al-Nas said that this was also the opinion of Yahya ibn Ma'in. Yahya ibn Ma'in is a famous hadith scholar that lived with Imam Ahmad. They were like a duo. Allah reward him. But he says that was his opinion. In other words, he's not saying that it was the opinion of Yahya ibn Ma'in. He's saying that one of the scholars said that was a position of Yahya ibn Ma'in. Right? So he's not saying that he thinks that that's it. Right? It's important to know, right? Because a lot of in our modern day, people will say that this is the madhab of Ahl Sunnah. And okay, maybe there's a couple people in the past, but it's not by any stretch of the imagination is it the common opinion of Ahl Sunnah, right? So the common position of Ahl Sunnah and the strong position of Ahl Sunnah is that you can act on it with conditions in terms of virtue. You can't act on it. It doesn't affect theology and certain elements of the law. Great. So Bilal mentioned the other question that I was going to ask, which is, what are the conditions for acting on da'if hadith? What are the conditions that we do? You can look at your notes, it's okay. But what are they? Somebody give me one.
that it's used for fada'il as opposed to theology and law.
Yes, so it's going to be fada'il al-a'mal, right? That's the first thing. What's the second one? It's not excessively weak. And he gives examples. For example, like only one person narrates this hadith and they're known to be a liar. So in that case, right? Because sometimes there'll be a hadith and there's somebody in the chain that's known to be a liar, but there's another narration of the hadith that doesn't have them in it. So it's like, khalas, so what if it has somebody that has it in there? There's multiple narrations of the same hadith. Right? And what's the third?
The meaning agrees with the Sharia.
Yes. That there's an asl in the Sharia of the Prophet ﷺ. And then what's number 4?
That you don't say that there's no doubt the Prophet sallallahu alaihi
Great.
wasallam.
I really like how you said that. Like he says in Arabic, and لا يعتقد عند العمل به ثبوته بل يعتقد الاحتياط. So he doesn't say 100% this is a sunnah, right? He just says, like, I'm doing this as like an extra virtuous act, and possibly it's correct. Right? Cool. Any questions about that? Because I know it's something that comes up a lot. Any questions about the da'if question before we move on to today's hadith? So all of these definitions that I gave you, I'm not going to be like super stringent with you about the definitions, because I myself I don't have that level of knowledge. If I did, I probably would be that stringent with you, but I can't hold you accountable to something that I myself have not fulfilled. I don't think that that's fair. So, but general knowledge of them, if I gave you like an exam of like what is the definition of da'if and what is the definition of sahih and like what are the four, you should be able to answer that. Okay? With your notes, and we're not going to ask you without your notes. Okay. So we are on number 10 of the ahadith of the compilation of Habib Umar in this. And remember, this text is a compilation, a selection from a compilation by Sayyid Muhammad al-Haddar, who was a teacher of Sayyid al-Habib Umar, who had about 360 odd hadith that he compiled from a collection that is very well known called the Jami' al-Saghir of Imam al-Suyuti. So you got Imam al-Suyuti's text, Sayyid al-Habib Muhammad, he compiled about 360 of them. Assalamu alaikum, Brad. And then Sayyid al-Habib Umar, he compiled from them 50 plus hadith that we're covering together. So we're on number 10. Now I wanted to go back to number 9 because I actually covered number 9 with you because we had more time and I didn't want to miss it. But I felt like I didn't give it its right. So we want to go back to it. So number 9, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم البخيل من ذكرت عنده فلم يصلي عليه. حديث صحيح رواه الإمام أحمد. Right? So this has been narrated by Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. And really, I mean, we can't over exaggerate how important it is to make this point. That the miserly person is the one who, when he hears my name, he doesn't send salawat and taslim upon me. Alayhi afdal as-salatu was-salam. And really, guys, like, we should push ourselves that every time we hear his name or he's referred to, that we say it in our hearts for sure, but even with our tongues. Because if you push yourself to say it with your tongue, it will encourage you to say it. We shouldn't be hearing his name, alayhi salatu wasalam, and not sending salawat and taslim upon him, alayhi afdal as-salatu wasalam. And he doesn't need our salah and salam. He doesn't need it. Allah is constantly in increase. But it does us good, right, that we do it, right? And the Shafi'is, the Hanafis have different percent. The Shafi'is, even in Salat al-Jumu'ah, they encourage you. And some of the ulama even saying it like really out loud. So like in Yemen, they do that. So in Yemen, at the beginning, when they say, Alhamdulillah, Salat, so when they get to the salawat on the Prophet ﷺ, the whole crowd will say, Sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi, or like, Allahumma salli alayhi wa ala alihi, right? The entire crowd, right? And it's kind of cool to have that kind of back and forth. Of course, there are other opinions that you're not supposed to do that. So if you follow another madhab, you do what the madhab does. But it's very important because the wa'ad and the wa'id is like promises of good, and wa'id is like promises of negative. By Allah and the Prophet ﷺ about this are numerous. Right? They're numerous, yani. Right? And so, we talked to you about some of them, not seeing his face on the day of judgment. وَلِيَعْذُ بِاللَّهِ. And, being a miser. Right? And one of the ulama, when I was reviewing this for today, he said, like, this is true miserliness because you're not actually giving up anything. Like, you're not even giving anything up. Why wouldn't you do it? Right? So it's true miserliness, right? It's the worst type, and really all of disbelief, it revolves around who the Prophet ﷺ is and accepting him. Alhamdulillah. Really, that's where true disbelief, that's what it rotates around. That's the axiom. It's the Prophet ﷺ, right? And so when people don't have it in them to love him and to send salawat and taslim upon him, that's going to affect their faith, yani, and it could lead to disbelief. So encouraging that, pushing that away is very important. He has more right to us than we have to our own selves. Right? So we got to be people who send salawat and taslim upon him, and we get reward from it. So there's no reason not to. So I just wanted to kind of review that one because we we kind of shortchanged it last time because it was kind of quick. So what we really want to start with though today is Hadith 10, right? So قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم التاجر الأمين الصدوق المسلم مع الشهداء يوم القيامة. حديث صحيح رواه الحاكم. So who's got the text with them that can read it for us? Patrick, you mind reading?
The Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The trustworthy, honest Muslim merchant is with the martyrs on the day of resurrection."
Allah reward you. An authentic hadith narrated by Hakim. So what I've been doing when I prepare for this class is we have a well-known commentary of Habib's compilation by one of the women at Dar al-Zahra, and we use that. And Amjad translated that, and I'll give you that before the midterm. I'll give you Amjad's translation. But I also am going to some of the commentaries on Jami' al-Saghir of Imam al-Suyuti to pull out some extra kind of meanings and fawaid, some benefits. So I'm going to read to you one of the commentaries here about this hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ says, "At-tajir al-amin as-saduq al-muslim." These attributes, right? The trustworthy, honest Muslim merchant, right? Yuhshar, he's brought out. That's not in the hadith, right? He's resurrected, right? That's why he means he's with the martyrs. He means he's resurrected with the martyrs, right? On the day of judgment. Why, or what are some of the wisdoms? The commentator says, for his gathering of honesty and witnessing with truth and encouraging creation to follow the commands that have to do with business, right? And the hadith that might seem to kind of note some type of blameworthiness to business, those are the people who are treacherous in business, right? So the people who are not, this doesn't apply to them, right? In fact, here the hadith is saying they receive all this type of reward. And there's other hadith that are similar to it. There's a hadith that says in a Jami' al-Saghir, التاجر الصدوق الأمين مع النبيين والصديقين والشهداء. Right? So another narration says, or another hadith says, the businessman or the merchant that's honest, that's trustworthy, is with the prophets and with the, what did Shaykh Abdul Karim translate Siddiqeen? He says the voracious saints or something like that, voracious something. Is Siddiq, and with the martyrs, right? So even with more people of piety, like the prophets, right? And then the comment, "Hasuna ulaika rafiqa." What an amazing company that is. Although that hadith is Hasan Gharib, right? And then we have "At-tajir as-saduq tahta dhill al-arshi yawm al-qiyamah." Look at that. The merchant that's honest is under the dhil, the shade of the throne on the day of judgment. Look at that. Which means that Allah will protect him from the warmth and the heat of the day of judgment. Right, because Allah doesn't have a dhil, He doesn't have a shade. We have to be careful. This teaches you that, like, why it's so important to have like aqidah when you engage this stuff. Somebody will be like, "Oh, God has a shade." No, God doesn't have shade. This is, Allah will protect you from the heat of that day, right? All right, I think there was one more. Let's see. Yep. التاجر الصدوق لا يحجب من أبواب الجنة. Look at this amazing hadith. The merchant that's honest will not be prohibited from the gates of heaven. And then the commentator said, بل يدخل من أيها شاء. No, he'll enter from any of the doors that he wants, because he benefits himself and benefits others. Right, and we won't go into that other hadith. And so let's go back to this hadith, right? The hadith says the trustworthy, honest Muslim merchant is with the martyrs on the day of resurrection. Okay? So there's a lot that we can take from this. I'm going to read some from the other commentary that Amjad translated. This hadith encourages Muslims to be honest in all situations, especially in business, because business involves dealing with other servants of God, the exalted, and not violating their rights. 2, to avidly attempt to be trustworthy, for whoever is trustworthy attains the company of the martyrs. 3, it highlights the struggle one goes through and magnificent reward one receives when being an upright Muslim in this world. It is not easy to be honest and trustworthy when dealing in trade and business. And that's really clear and evident, right? Because if a person, can make more money, sometimes they'll shortchange and they'll try to cut corners to make money, right? And this is difficult when you have the ability, right? Who was it telling me? I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was somebody here that they worked at this big firm, and then they were going back through their records, and they realized that they had continued to be charging one of their clients over the last couple of years for a service that they were no longer offering it to them. And he said he came back to them and they gave them the money back, and they were so shocked that they even did more business with them. So they're like, why would you've been overcharging us, we didn't even know for the last couple of years, and now you're going to give us our money back? That's so honest, yani, right? But you don't want to feed your family from haram, yani, or yourself. So God is aware of that, and when one of his servants struggles for his sake, he graces them with his mercy and his generosity. Those who strive in our way, we give them of our way, right? And here it's also, we mentioned this yesterday at the MSA thing, and I think we've mentioned it in this group as well. Sayyid Habib Umar mentioned this thing that I really felt was really powerful, and it's something I've heard from other people as well, but I think it's really important to pay attention to, that a lot of these things are communal obligations. Somebody has to do them, right? Somebody in the town has to sell the fruit and the vegetables, right? You can't have nobody sell or nobody grows it. People won't survive. Somebody's got to do it. So the person who does it, one, needs to understand that what they're doing has a place in the religion. It's not separate from the religion. And what Sayyid Habib Umar told us that I really think is really powerful and important is he said that when the du'at, when the people who are calling to Allah or the ulama separate people's lives from their religion, it creates a void and a vacuum that is then filled by other philosophies and theologies and outlooks that are bad for the ummah, right? So one is for the person to know, and for the da'i and for the scholars to know that what these people are doing is part of the religion. Yani. Somebody's got to do it. It's a communal obligation. Somebody being a physician is a communal obligation. Somebody's got to be a physician. To tell people to separate medicine from the religion is detrimental, not only to the physician, is detrimental to the society, right? 2, that in a lot of these professions, some of the questions about that profession have a direct link back to the Sharia, right? And if you don't know the Sharia well enough, you won't know that, right? So you should know that there's a lot of questions in ethics that have to do with law or medicine or business, but even beyond that, trade, transaction, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and it was really awesome. I think I'd mentioned this to you before. I watched online, they started having these business workshops in Tarim, where Sheikh Umar and Mufti Mashhur would sit in the masjid, and the businessmen would come, and they would just discuss transactions and stuff. And they'd ask questions, and it'd be a back and forth because some of them are new things that they've come up with, can we do this or can we do that, and that was really, really amazing. And then the third thing is that he said that there has to be an attachment and a love for the ulama and the pious ulama, right? Because you have to have a relationship with the scholars in order to ask questions when you need to, right? And for me, on any given day, you can ask Sheikh Abdul Karim. I might annoy him 4, 5, 6 times with questions, right? And he said to us that for years, the only person who would ask him questions about transactions would be Usama Cannon. For years. So that means all these people who are dealing in transactions, they just didn't understand that their transactions, they need to know what's halal and what's haram. Yani. And so having an attachment just in terms of legality, But then Habib Umar pointed out also that in terms of adab and tarbiyah, it's really useful. He said there was a time when like the farmers, they would teach them what was allowed and what wasn't in terms of transactions and these types of things. But also like you should use these dua when you plant, and you should use these dua when you cultivate, and you should do this. So there was like a real like tarbiyah even in the climate of the thing. So why am I saying this in this hadith? Because it's really pointing to like being a businessman can be very rewarding. Yani the Prophet ﷺ is saying that, right? So not everyone has to be a scholar, right? And I don't think that's really a disease that we have, that everyone thinks they have to be a scholar. But like the point is, don't get people wrong when they're on the pulpit or when they're teaching that that's what the intent is, because I do think that that's creating kind of a divide that isn't healthy, right? So we're not saying everyone has to be a scholar. We're saying is we need scholars in the ummah. We need more. We don't have enough. But also, even the people who are not scholars, they should learn the interface between their careers and their professions and the religion, right? And they definitely need to know what the basis is of validity of worship and soundness of purity, what they need to believe, how to purify their heart. But then they need to learn about their professions, right? So like Brad, Allah reward him, he's an accountant, and he also, works at a body shop, or he owns a body shop. And, there might be certain transactions, or there might be certain things that have to do with that like the Sharia has rulings on. So he'll call Sheikh Abdul Kareem and he'll say, how do I deal with this, or how do I deal with that, right? Some of you might be physicians, some of you might be students, these types of things. These are things that we have to think about, right? So I do think this is relevant here. But I do think it's also amazing that the Prophet ﷺ is, talking about the reward of a person who's honest, and having honest business places are important. And if we're always cutting corners, guys, our community will never get out of it. Sheikh Musa, Mufti Musa Ferber, who he's translated quite a bit. He's a convert. He lives currently in the Emirates, works for Taba, studied in Syria, studied in Egypt, Dar al-Ifta, received ijazah to give fatwa by Sheikh Ali Jum'ah. When I was there with him, I was helping him at Dar al-Ifta with some translations. And like he told me, like some of the muftis of Egypt, every time Americans would ask them about meat, they would give fatwa that like it's okay because of like the situation that you're in, right? And what he told them, and I think is really relevant here, is he said, look, if you keep telling them it's okay, they'll never create options outside of that. But like being honest with them, they'll create options. Like what? Like insurance, right? Now, alhamdulillah, there's starting to be like Takaful is a home insurance provider that, some of the people that we trust in terms of economics in Islam really have looked into, and they said they have no doubt that they believe that it's halal. But we don't have as far as I know, there's no car insurance one yet, right? But we have to buy car insurance. It's by law, we have to. So like if we just keep telling people, oh, don't worry about it, it's okay, then nobody will ever fill that slot, right? But we need somebody to fill that slot, right? And we need somebody to fill it not just so that they can get rich, right? We need somebody to fill it because they fear Allah and they want the community to have halal options, I think that's one of the things that we learn from this, right? That doing these things is good for the health of the community. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send his peace and blessings upon our noble and our beloved Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu. So we're going to go on to 11, and we'll take questions at the end, inshallah. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاثة لا ترفع صلاتهم فوق رؤوسهم رجل أما قوما وهم له كارهون وامرأة باتت وزوجها عليها ساخط وأخوان متصارمان حديث حسن رواه ابن ماجه. Bilal, can you read it for us, please?
The Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the prayer of three does not even rise above their heads a handspan. A man who leads people in prayer while they are averse to him, a woman who sleeps at night while her husband is angry with her, and two brothers who are mutually estranged. A sound hadith narrated by Ibn Majah. Right,
so three people, their prayer doesn't even go above their heads by a handspan. That means not even a little bit. In other words, that they don't benefit from their prayer greatly, right? رَجُلٌ أَمَّا قَوْمًا قَوْمًا. No, this has got to be a mistake in the Arabic. Yep. وَهُمْ لَهُ كَارِهُونَ. That was just a mistake in the print. So if most of them are against him, right, for leading, for a shar'i reason, like a valid shar'i reason, then, that is something that's blameworthy and he shouldn't do that. And then a woman who sleeps at night and her husband is displeased with her, he's angry with her, for, again, a shari'i reason, not just any reason, right? Something that's valid in the sharia. And brothers, whether they be in blood or religion, that are in conflict and they don't speak to one another for more than 3 days, right? And that's one understanding of the hadith. Then another understanding of the hadith, there's some things to keep in mind. Again, we're talking about most of the people for a shari'i reason. Like what? Like he's a fasiq, right? Or he has a bid'ah. Or he's easy in dealing with that which is filthy and wrong. Or he leaves something of the hay'as of salah, like one of the forms of salah. Not the integrals, but one of like the forms. He leaves it purposefully, right? Even though the people want him to do it. Or he works in a job that is blameworthy. Right? So that's something that one of the commentators says about that part of the hadith. And then we're talking about the woman who sleeps and her husband's displeased with her. Like what? Bad character. Or that she leaves a right that she owes him. From the sharia. Not like something that he believes he's owed. Right? From the sharia. In terms of obligation. Or in terms of recommended. And then brothers. Two brothers, again, whether it's religion or it's blood. Mutasariman, ay mutahajiran, meaning they leave one another, they don't speak to one another. Mutaqati'an, they cut each other off. For other than Allah, like they're doing this for their own personal reasons, not for Allah, because sometimes you have to do that for the sake of Allah, right? It's not allowed, it's prohibited for a Muslim to leave another Muslim for more than 3 days. Yep, right. So it does not raise above their heads and handspan. It's not accepted, basically, is what he's trying to say, or at least the reward is very deficient. Right? Mutually estranged. They've cut off relations with each other. And then the meaning of the hadith as cited by this smaller commentary in Habib Umar's compilation, that the prayer of the above mentioned types of people is not raised to the heads, i.e. their prayers are not accepted. Some scholars have interpreted it to mean that their prayer is not accepted as a full good deed, but only a small portion is accepted. The first is of a man who leads a congregation of people in the prayer while they are disinclined to him because of some repulsive trait within him, or because of his deficiency in the prayer, or because he has a dishonorable reputation. This man should not lead the prayer, and if he forces himself upon others to be the imam, then his prayer does not even rise above his head. And I mean, I don't need to say this to you all, but we'll just say it because, you know, it's part of the class, but I know you're not like this. Nobody should want to lead, yani. They shouldn't be the ones who are like, I want to lead, like, I'm going to go first, you know. And so pushing yourself on people like that is really inappropriate. And for a while, like a long time ago in MSAs, it's really odd. I don't know if it was during your period. Like, it was like unwritten rule that the MSA president had to lead the salah. It's really strange. But yeah, that's not, yani, maybe they thought it was like the Khalifa, because then the Khalifa would lead, but they're not Khalifa, yani. You know, so there's rules to who should lead. In the Shafi'i school and in the Hanafi school, there are differences about who should be leading the prayer. Second case is of a woman who retires for the night while her husband is angry with her because of an unwarranted, I don't know why we're translating that way, I have to go back to the Arabic, but a bad character trait on her part, or because she has not fulfilled a right, or she owes him. Right? So that is that. Right? And then the third one we covered. All right, we'll do number 12, inshallah, and then we'll take questions. There might be time to do 13. We started a little late, so I don't know if I want to finish 13 or not. We'll see. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم جالس الكبراء وسائل العلماء وخالط الحكماء حديث صحيح رواه الطبراني. Can you read 12 for us?
Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, accompany the eminent, ask the scholars, and mix with the wise.
Right, Allah reward you. Authentic hadith narrated by Tabarani. So they say Jalis al-Kubara, al-Shiyukh, right? The Shiyukh, the scholars. Why? To take the adab that they have and to take on the akhlaq that they have, right? The manners and the etiquettes that they have from the people of religion. And I looked at some of the commentators and some differences of opinion about is it talking just about the people of religion or is it talking about, the elderly as well? But it seems to be, at least the scholars, but even maybe the people who are elderly who have these traits. Because sitting with them and accompanying them gives a person a state from their state. And at the very least, it gives them some traces of their state. And you benefit from them. And, he mentions an axiom here that I'll mention in another phrasing. They have a saying, "Man la yanfa'uk halu, la yanfa'uk maqalu." The person who does not benefit you in their state will not benefit you in their sayings, right? And this is related because accompanying them is enough, right? You don't necessarily have to hear them always, right? But being in their company and in their presence is often enough. That we'll cover here in a moment as well, right? Right. And they have this understanding from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that a gaze from somebody who is pious will benefit you. Just them looking at you. And a gaze from somebody, like we know the evil eye, right? A gaze from somebody who has malintent often can harm you, right? It can harm you. Jealousy can harm you. These types of things can harm you through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. Right. So Sihrawardi said he used to go around the mosque in Mina, and he would look at the faces of people. So they told him, "Why are you doing that?" So he said that the servants of Allah, if they look at you, they give you, some servants of Allah, if they look at you, they will give you a happiness that's eternal. And alhamdulillah for people like that. And then he says, وَسَائِلُ الْعُلَمَاء, and ask the scholars. Not any scholars, not Sheikh Fulan ibn Fulan on satellite or Sheikh Fulan ibn Fulan on Google, but people who act on their knowledge. You don't want to take from people who don't act on their knowledge, right? You shouldn't want to take from people who don't act on their knowledge. Why? Because they'll teach you about the ahkam of the religion, the rules of the religion. وَخَالِطُ الْحُكَمَاء. In other words, mix with those people who have wisdom. Because they're the people who really hit the mark in their actions and their sayings. And when you interact with them, your character will improve. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يُؤْتِي الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Allah gives wisdom to whom He wills, and whoever's been given wisdom has been given abundant good. Right? And there's some conversation in the commentary when I was preparing for this about, why he says these three things and do they overlap, right, or not overlap, and there's some differences of opinion. But clearly here what's being encouraged is that you spend time with the righteous, right, and you spend time with the knowledgeable. And Imam al-Ramli, the famous scholar and sage, he says in his poem on raising young boys that that should be something that you do very early on, at the ages of 7, 8, 9, that you put them around pious people, right? Because eventually it'll impact them. And that's one of the difficulties with modern schooling is when you put everyone around other people like them, they don't grow. If everyone in the group is the same age and the same knowledge level, how are they going to grow? And that's one of the difficulties also of our programming. And I've heard Sheikh Abdul Karim say that, and I really, I think it's a very wise testament. Is if all of our programming, we take the kids and they're always alone, and they don't learn to sit and they don't learn to benefit, that's not healthy for the community. It's not always have it your way. It's not always take away. The religion is you have to grow into it, right? There's time for that, but not always, right? So reading kind of some of the commentary that Allah reward Amjad for translating, he said, accompany, spend time with them and learn from them. Asking the scholars, ask questions about rulings one would like to understand. Scholars are people who have knowledge of halal and haram. So the Messenger of Allah is encouraging his followers to accompany eminent elders who have experienced life and who have calmed down from the frivolity of the youth. Right? There's a famous saying in English, I'm forgetting it now, but that the elders learn from the zealotry and the strength of the young, then the young learn from the wisdom of the elderly. Virtuous elders are more aware of the fleeting nature of the world. They are, they've seen it all, so to speak, right? Which in turn makes them conscientious of filling their covenant with Allah. One benefits by seeing that the eminent have a deeper understanding of the purpose of life and that their hearts are busied with remembering Allah. When elders have these noble qualities, they are then considered of the eminent because of their piety and nearness to their Lord. When one sees them, one remembers God the Exalted. Right? And, if you think about it, like we act differently if there's like a sheikh in the room or an elderly person in the room. People act different when there's other people in the room. So being around them is useful. Secondly, one should ask scholars about issues that come up regarding religious rulings. First and foremost, a Muslim should have knowledge of the basic requirements, the personal obligations. No one has an excuse not to seek that out, right? Everyone should seek it out, right? And that's what you all are doing here, inshallah, by taking classes with Sheikh Abdul Kareem and Dr. Saad, and so forth, right? Everyone should seek that out. After that, an understanding of the basics. One should ask the scholars regarding rulings of business, marriage, and other situations that may come up, right? We should know these things as they come up. We should have people we can reach out to. Not just in rulings of worship and transaction and marriage, but even of our own hearts. A lot of times like things will come up and I can't tell, is that my ego or is that the right thing to do? And so having people who are learned that you can ask is really, really important. And lastly, it is deeply beneficial to mix with the wise at all times, for they are the people who speak the truth and understand the true nature of things. One should mix with them because they understand the order of priorities in this world and are not fooled by the many illusions that the dunya projects. Right? That's enormous, yani. Yeah, we were just reading one of the ulama. He was saying, how to deal with the disbelievers. And then he said, that we don't give them, you don't give their plots and their plans against the believers more time than it's due. And like the Muslim Ummah is plagued with conspiracy theories, But, there are conspiracies, but we don't need to spend all of our time worrying about it. So he said, give it from the fikr, from the thought of the righteous, a small amount that's due, because that suffices it. We don't have time to constantly be, then they did this, and then they did that, and maybe they did this. It's gotten to the point that it's almost like a theological belief that they're capable of doing everything. You give it a certain amount. It's important that we be aware. We can't be like ignorant and just kind of assume that everyone has the best out for us, right? But it's only a certain amount, and then the rest of it we focus on what the Prophet ﷺ told us to focus on. I'll give you an example, and this is... I'll tell it after we stop the recording. So, we give it what it is, and that's it. We prioritize what's appropriate, right? And we don't go beyond that. So, some lessons. The Prophet is highlighting, alayhi salatu wasalam, the importance of accompanying the eminent, the scholars, and the wise, because of the great advantages and benefits one attains from being with them. Sitting with the eminent teaches one not to put value in anything except Allah. Right? Asking the scholars helps one become well informed about the religion, which causes one to desire performing good deeds and attaining nearness to God the Exalted. And really, the hadith of Sayyidina Hanbala, the well-known one about, he says that I've become a hypocrite. And basically, that's what it teaches us. When they were around the Prophet ﷺ, their whole being changed. And some people of piety, it's like, it's always on. Every time you're around them, you feel that spiritual. And some of them are in control of it. And then, when they look at you certain ways, they're rearing you and they're nurturing you. And others, Allah has just blessed them, that you just around them, it benefits. The Prophet ﷺ, clearly Allah had given him a level of control over it. Because, in multiple occasions, he put his hand on people's hearts and it just changed them. in the well-known hadith about the differences in the recitations of the Quran. The Sahabi says, like, after he explained to me why there were different things, that like doubt began to enter my heart about the Prophet, and then he said he just put his hand on my heart, and he said it's like the sky opened and I was gazing at Allah. And multiple hadith, they talk about, again, the piety that they felt just being in the company of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi afdal salatu wasalam. And so being around the inheritors of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it has a positive impact. And company is not always physical, right? That's better, and it's good if you can be in them physically, but sometimes it's better for you to be far away because you're still in their company, right? And that might be better for your religion, right? So don't always think that it has to be always physical proximity, right? Like some of our shaykh would say, like, it's not these walls, right? That's not what you're seeking out, right? It's that the company's in the hearts. And the more that you're present here, the more that it has an impact. Because some people will physically be there and they won't be physically benefiting or spiritually benefiting. There were people around the Prophet ﷺ, mu'taridin, yani, masakin, they're in hell forever. Right? They were physically near him. Right? And then there are people who would come way at the end of time that the Prophet ﷺ prayed for and promised great reward for. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of them. Okay, I think I don't want to keep Dr. Saad waiting. I know we started late. I don't think it's fair to keep him waiting for his class. So we'll end with, inshallah, a dua, and then I wanted to just share with you a story. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi sahbihi sallam ajma'in. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He forgives us of our sins, large and small, that He gives us of that which is good. We ask Him that we act upon these words of the Prophet ﷺ, and that we know that they're true when we hold them to be true. And we ask that the words of the Prophet ﷺ fill our hearts with light, with love, with guidance, that we be people who act upon the knowledge, that we be people who seek out Allah, and that He be our goal in this life and the next. We ask Him what the Prophet ﷺ asked Him of. We seek His protection from the Prophet ﷺ sought His protection from. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam ajma'in. Al-Fatiha.